This week's episode is brought to you by Sin Bodhi's custom LJNs. Go to facebook.com/SinsLJNs. That's SINNSLJNS. And check out the amazing work that Sin Bodhi does with his custom action figures. If you would like a custom LJN style 8-inch figure of yourself or your favorite professional wrestler, just contact Sin Bodhi. Get your custom wrestling figure from an actual pro wrestler. Sin Bodhi has great designs, great prices, and he is really good looking. He told me to say that, and I agreed to it. Why? Because he is. Listen to the commercial halfway through this episode with one of my amazingly cute children, and they'll tell you more about why you should check out Sins LJNs at facebook.com/SINNSLJNS. Sin Bodhi's custom LJNs.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with me, Cody Deaner. I am a professional wrestler. I'm a professional wrestling producer. I'm a professional motivational speaker. I'm a professional dad. I'm a father of 4 wonderful children. I am also not a professional. I had to clarify this with my wife. I'm not a professional, but I am a proud husband of a beautiful wife because I don't get paid to be a husband. Maybe I should. No, I'll do it for free because my wife is awesome. And I am a semi-professional podcaster. I say semi-professional podcaster because to be a professional, you got to get paid. And I'm not getting paid to do this, but I am making a little bit of money over on patreon.com/Cody Deaner, where you can get episodes early and ad-free, as well as bonus stories from my guests, including a bonus story from today's guest in part 2 of Crazzy Steve. If you listened last week, you listened to the beginning of the epic trilogy that is the story and journey of our friend Crazzy Steve, and it is wild. It is amazing, and it is, yes, crazy, pun intended. But if you're a Patreon over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner, then you've already listened to part 2 and next week's part 3 because you would have got the full interview early and ad-free over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner, as well as a very funny bonus story never before heard, shared from Crazzy Steve. And I'm not even going to say anything. Just go on over to my patreon.com and look at what it says in terms of a teaser and what that is, and you'll see I have to listen to this story. So that's over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner. So thank you to my patrons that have been supporting me through there, or anyone who's been supporting me through other ways like prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner. Anyone that's bought a cameo over at cameo.com/Cody Deaner. Or if you're an amazing business who's been advertising with me here on this podcast, thank you. You've been listening to some commercials at the beginning of these episodes, as well as the halfway point, which you'll hear another one today with one of my beautiful children. If you want to advertise your business with me here, just drop me a line at ads@codydeaner.com. That's ads@codydeaner.com, or head on over to the podcast page, which is codydeaner.com/podcast. Fill in the form and we'll figure out how we can bring more business to your business. If you are just listening to this right now, but you want to be watching it and seeing some videos that I'll be posting online about this podcast, shorts, clips, all kinds of good stuff, then go on over to my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/@CodyDeaner podcast. If you cannot support me monetarily through my Patreon or Pro Wrestling Tees or Cameo, that's cool. You've been supporting me by taking pictures and screenshots of yourself listening to this and uploading it to your social media and tagging me at Cody Deaner, and I appreciate it. Some people have been rating, reviewing, and subscribing on their podcast platform, and I very much appreciate that. I have said that if you review this show, I will read that review on my show, and I want to do that right now for a very special listener. who dropped a comment on Apple Podcasts. And that listener is GB Genius over on the Apple Podcast apps, had to say this when they discovered Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner. Just found episode 1 and love that it isn't a what is your favorite match? Who would you most like to wrestle type of interview. I'm always interested in going deeper than that. And just the casual nature of this chat and what the life of a wrestler is like is far more interesting to me and means that I will be adding this to my podcast rotation. We'll be subscribing on YouTube to make sure I don't miss an episode. Keep up the great work. Hashtag good cop moment. This is from GB Genius over on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, GB Genius, for adding me to your podcast rotation. I know that there is a lot of wrestling podcasts out there, but I've said this before and I'll say it again. This isn't just a wrestling podcast. It's a life podcast because wrestling is life is wrestling. And I want to go deeper with professional wrestlers and friends of mine, and a very good friend of mine for over 2 decades is again today's guest. This is part 2 with Crazy Steve. If you did not listen to part 1, you need to. That is the origin story. Last week was the origin story of this epic trilogy of my friend Crazy Steve. And if you listened last week, you know what I'm talking about. To those who haven't, you got to go listen to it. Crazy Steve just has such an amazing story. And before we jump into part 2 here, I just want to thank my friend Steve because he's so open and vulnerable. And that can be hard for a lot of people to do, but especially performers that get in the ring, like Steve, who's used to putting on face paint and putting on a character and letting this character be shown to the world. We don't always take off the costume and just be us in the public eye. And that's exactly what Steve has done with me in this trilogy. He's taken off the paint, literally, and shown us the man behind the paint. And he's never done this before. You know, this is a first time for Steve to really let people know the true story behind his life struggles. And today we're going to hear more about those struggles. But I think more important than hearing the struggles is hearing how Steve has been able to overcome those struggles and the lessons he's learned along the way, which is exactly why I want Steve on this episode, because I've been inspired by my friend for 2 decades. And now I'm just so excited to be sharing that inspiration with the world with you here today. So I don't want to wait any longer because I know you're here and you're excited about part 2 of this interview, and so am I. This is an amazing talk, an amazing continuation of last week's part 1 with Crazy Steve. So let me just stop rambling here and stop putting over my guest, even though I could do that forever because Steve is so awesome. Let's just jump right now into part 2 with my friend Crazy Steve.
So I had this conversation with my mom, and I remember she was always been my number one fan, and I always got along with her throughout my entire childhood. So I called her and I said, "Mom, here's the deal. Jake O'Reilly is he's found a wrestling school, and I could potentially go train there, but I'm thinking I'm pretty small, and I should get my plan B. So maybe I go to college." There'll be a gym there. I'll work out really hard throughout college. And when I'm done that, then maybe I can be more presentable to go to wrestling school. And she said, "Buddy, there's no age limit on college. There will definitely be an age limit on pro wrestling. You've wanted this all your life. Now's the chance. Go do it." I was like, "All right.
Dude,
Deal."
that's amazing. Your mom's the best.
Dude.
Well, dude, like that is the exact inverted conversation I had with my father. I said, "Dad, I'm going to wrestling school." He said, "No, you're not. You're going to college." And I had to tell him, I can go to college anytime. I can't go to wrestling school anytime. This opportunity isn't always going to be there. It's there now, and I got to go do it. I had that in my head, and I had to fight with my dad against it. You had the opposite. You had a supportive parent and your mom that was like, nope, you're going to go do this now. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you got mom support, but that does not fix the scenario that you're a blind 120-pound kid.
No, not at all.
That is going to go and be a freaking professional wrestler. Like, what the hell? Like that right there tells everybody else, anyone in that situation, take the eyesight out of it. It's like, no, dude, you're 120 pounds. Don't go bother. Maybe is it the power of a positive parent that, with that push behind it, that helps you have that confidence? It's got to be one of the things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like I said, like I still remember that conversation. Obviously, like it was yesterday. So that support gave me everything I needed to go. But like, again, at the end of the day, it is what it is. I'm still this size, and then I take the eyesight out of it even.
Yeah. I talk about how important it is to have a support system around us. I've had this conversation with everybody I've talked to so far for this podcast. We've talked about how important it is to have, people that come alongside you as your support system. You need that on a whole other level, not because you need someone to drive you. You're like forced support. So we can definitely shout out our brother Jake O'Reilly right now, who I'm going to have on this podcast at some point. I want to talk to him because he's got a cool story too, and he's our mutual friend, still wrestling to this day, but he decides to say, okay, Steve, you're going to be my passenger in this car and we're going to go to this wrestling school. Take me through that experience, that drive, that first day, take me through that.
So at this moment in class, Jake O'Reilly is having his first test match, right? So up to this point, he's been training all the moves, he's been training all the footwork, the timing, but now we're going to put it together, and he's going to have a full-on match.
So he started going to the school and started training before you did. You came after? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you guys both went on the first day together.
No, because it took some convincing.
Oh wow! Okay.
It took some convincing on his part.
I'm learning something here. Okay, so you didn't start on the first day, so he's progressed pretty far to actually be having like a test match.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Gotcha.
So he had been going, and I had met him through backyard wrestling.
Yep.
And so we would do that, and then he found the school and started training, and he told me about it, and I believe I was apprehensive. I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he kept bugging me because we lived in a small town, so he'd see me, and he's like, I'd see him at the gas station. He's like, I'm just going to wrestling school. You need to come with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I went with him after getting somewhere in between the conversation with my mom. I went. Right. And he was having his first full-on match, and he wanted me to record it so that he has footage of it and he can go back and study. And not only that, but it would give me an opportunity to meet our friend Eric Young, who was the head trainer and owner of WrestlePlex. And I don't know whether or not to tell this story now or if it'll get brought up somewhere in the conversation, but I'm going to tell it now anyway.
Tell it now, because we're like 45 minutes in and we're only at your first day of wrestling school. So
right.
as long as you are okay with giving me your time, I want to try to get all of it. So we're probably you're going to be one of my longer guests, but I had a feeling that you would be because your story's fascinating. So lay it on me.
Okay. So not only was Jake O'Reilly trying to get me to come to EY school, but he was trying to get EY to convince him to train me. So, which he did not want to do at first. He did it. Well, he did off the initial introduction of like, hey, I have a buddy. I know you need students, EY. I have a buddy I did backyard wrestling with. I think he could be really good at it. And EY said, well, I'll bring him along.
Yeah.
He said, well, there's only the only problem is that he's legally blind. He can't really see. And so EY says, no, don't bring him. Listen, Bill, I don't want to take a blind guy's money and and I don't want to be the one to crush his childhood dream of becoming a pro wrestler. I'm not going to trade him.
There it is.
Well, listen, Eli, he can kind of see. Like we do backyard wrestling with him, so he can still see enough. And he's like, no, I can't do it. Don't bring him.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So number one, amazing Eli impression. Number two, that really shows you the moral fabric of Eric Young. He's right. He's like, instead of being this carny that's gonna just steal your money, he's like, no way, I can't do that. I can't steal his money, and I can't crush his dreams. So, shout out to Eli, who's an amazing human being. So, continue.
Yes. So after this back and forth, it was like, okay, bring him along, and he can watch your class. And then that was the class that Jake O'Reilly was having his first match. So I get into this wrestling school, and it's a dirty little dungy building. The ring is what we call a low boy. So it's the posts are kind of cut off below the apron, so it sits level to the ground as opposed to it being raised. And that threw me off right away because on TV, you don't ever see rings that are cut level to the ground.
Sure.
It totally threw me off.
Yep.
And then I watched the class. I got to know EY, and I felt comfortable around him immediately. Started joking with him and stuff like that, like right away. And especially even to the point where like I was joking with Jake O'Reilly too, where there was a break in class. And there was a break in class, and I was using the washroom, and he followed because he had to use the washroom. He's like, "So what do you think, man? Like, do you want to come?" And I was like, "You know what, dude? I really don't think this is for me." And he was blown away. He's like, "What?" He's like, "I thought as soon as I showed you everything that you'd jump right in." And I was like, "No, I don't know, man." And he's like, "For real?" And I was like, "No, not for real, dude. I totally want to do this. Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Oh, okay, great." So I go to EY and I say, "Hey, listen, like I would love to sign up. I would love to do this." And he basically said, "Well, look, like I know your eye condition is a thing, and I don't know if I can train you. So you will be the only person who does this if we move forward. I'm not going to make you sign anything right now. I'm going to have you get in that ring, and if you can, without your glasses on, and if you can walk back and forth to the ropes, then I think I can help you out." So I get in the ring. I take off my glasses. I can't see the ropes. But
oh man.
But he's not making me run. He's just like, here's how it is. It should just be 1, 2, pivot. There's the rope. 1, 2, pivot. There's the rope. 1, 2, pivot. There's the rope. And so it was, again, you walk, turn, touch the rope, lean back, walk, turn. And then I just kind of kept that pace.
Okay.
Now, it's impossible for me to explain to anybody out there what I'm visually seeing because you can't see what I see. All I said was I can't see the ropes. That doesn't mean I see black, or it's like I can see shapes and colors, but there's just a lot of blur to it.
Yes.
So it's like the closer I get to these ropes, I'm able to see them.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And since I'm moving at a very slow pace, it's not that difficult.
All right.
And then we start picking up the pace a little bit. And I'm not saying I'm full-fledged running, hitting the ropes, because I wasn't properly shown how to do that. This was just more of an eyesight test. This was the EY WrestlePlex eyesight test.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. And so we did a couple more things like that I guess like he doesn't have any knowledge of this either. This is his first time dealing with this. So he's coming up with these things off the fly.
Yeah.
Right. And so once I got his blessing that I passed the test, he was like, "All right, I think you can do this, and let's go." And so by the next week I was in there, and I can remember taking my first bump and the feeling of like, oh my God, like my first bump hitting the mat. Within seconds, like up to that point, a lifetime of pro wrestling that I had watched just all went and sucked into me. And it was like, this is what all of those people were doing. It just blew my mind.
Dude,
like,
what a good description. That's exactly what taking your first bump was like.
Yes.
Just like it just all comes into this moment, and it's you can't explain it. You can't explain that to anybody.
Nope.
But that is a good explanation. And
Not only is it a physical one, but it is a
yeah.
mental one.
Oh, dude, that's the worst part. I
Yep.
share a story during my speeches when I'm traveling around. I talk about my first day of wrestling school, and I share the whole story. And I actually do it in a comedic way when I'm talking to kids, you know, in terms of my first bump and the noise that I made when I landed, and you know, and they always get a kick out of that. And I make it into the funny story, but one of the lessons that I tell them is oftentimes the things that we think are the physical hardest, that's not the hardest part of that obstacle. It's the mental obstacles that are the hardest. And for me, that was so difficult, was overcoming the mental space of realizing what you had said. Wait a minute. This is what it's going to feel like every time I do this? Like,
Yeah.
This is what it's going to feel like every single time I fall down? I don't think I can do this. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, if this is what it's going to be like, man, all of those years, all of that dreaming and that striving, that it might all be done right now.
I would say I was getting to that, but I didn't have enough time to really get to that point before EY says, okay, get up and do it again.
Yeah.
Get up and do it again. Like, so that moment that we speak of, that everything, all these years of watching all of your heroes and villains take bumps throughout, you know, all that, it all happens and your body is in shock from what you physically have just done to it. But it's only this is happening in mere seconds before you have to get up and do it all over again. So I don't even have the physical time.
So you don't have the time to
process you don't have the time.
The pain, any of that stuff. Yeah. Okay, so then what's the learning process like for you? And because earlier I was talking about, you know, how did you know that you were different than the other kids in elementary school, or how do you know you're different in high school? And now you're in this other scenario, this next phase of your life where you're going to wrestling school, and your experience is going to be different than everybody else's because you have to figure out, modify somehow how you do things because you can't see. So what is that? What's that process? Maybe there isn't a lot of modification. I don't know. Like, take me through that.
So I definitely found my limits in the first year of training, right? Yep. But honestly, like and EY will tell you as well, like I gravitated towards wrestling super fast. Like he could show me how to do something and I would just know how to do it. And I think a lot of that is because it's hands-on. You're up close. You're with whoever you're working with. Like it's physical. And when it came to, like, I don't know, figuring out footwork and stuff like that, it was I just happened to gravitate towards it quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is I'm halfway athletic, but you know, more so obsessed, right? Like I'll give myself some credit. I can be athletic at times. So like learning to do a leapfrog or even to do a basic somersault was very easy. That came very simple to me, where some people, like the physical aspects of it, didn't. The things that I figured out that I couldn't do or shouldn't do is probably a better way of putting it, is like when it came to stuff like off the top rope, for instance, like a top rope leg drop, I don't do that. I don't really even do regular leg drops because judging the distance between like where my opponent's head is going to be versus when I'm jumping off the top rope is virtually like it's not. So we're not doing that.
Yes.
Learning how to punch and throw a good wrestling punch. I do it very rare. I work on them anytime I'm in class, which even up to this day, I still work on my punches. Mm-hmm. But I don't do it often because, again, to judge the distance between my opponent's face and how I'm going to throw it and how quickly it needs to be thrown it's either going to miss completely and look awful, or I'm going to crack them for real. Yeah. You know, and I'm not interested in doing that either. So I have learned to, let's think outside the box. If you're not going to throw a lot of punches, what else are you going to throw as far as strikes are concerned? And what can you throw? And then it becomes of like, okay, well, what are you comfortable with? How are you going to do that from a physical standpoint? So if it's instead of throwing punches, I'll throw a forearm because I can grab the back of my person's head. I can throw the forearm in a safe manner where it's going to hit them where it should, and it's it's going to look how it should.
Yeah. So there's a lot of modification and having to happen. I think there's people that are listening to this right now that I think are going to have the same experience that I know I've got to see firsthand with some wrestlers when they learn, wait a minute, that dude's blind. Like there's people that have watched you wrestle, Steve, for years, almost coming on decades, and they could watch you wrestle. It's such a testament to you, Steve. And they have absolutely no idea that you are a legally blind person because it's not apparent even in the slightest when you wrestle. And I've got to see that firsthand, you in the ring on an event and a show and talking to somebody. This happened countless times, Steve, where they're like, man, that guy's really good. I'm like, yeah, he's freaking awesome. He's a buddy of mine. Oh yeah. What's his story? Oh man. Like he kind of came from nothing, but he works really hard and he's blind. And they're like, what? What did you just say? Like, yeah, and he's blind. Like, and they kind of laugh, like, yeah. Oh, like he needs glasses. I'm like, no, he can't drive. He's not, there's lots of wrestlers that, need glasses and then don't see that well in the ring. No, dude's blind. And then their freaking mind is blown. So like, what a testament to you. As you were talking in terms of modification, it reminded me of different scenarios that you might be put in that you have to, again, overcome and modify. You've told me stories before where as we're struggling on the indies and we start doing shows and we might do a show in a bar and said bar is not well lit and ring that we are using has black ropes. So now we're in a dark room with dark ropes, and Crazy Steve has to wrestle and run and hit those ropes. How the hell do you do it?
Yeah, so the best way I describe that is like I'm like a shitty version of Daredevil, right? It's not quite bat sonar, but it's something to that, right? And like, yeah, I've definitely been in situations where the ropes are thin and they're black and you're in a smoky bar and like I think a lot of that harkens back to EY and his training and just like learning how to protect yourself or again, even think outside the box. The beauty of the Crazy Steve character is that I can virtually do anything and it's acceptable because I'm crazy. So if I'm in a scenario like that, then maybe I will try and limit the amount of times that I hit the ropes, or I just simply won't hit them at all because I can do that because my character allows for such things.
Right.
So, you have to be creative in that way and figure it out. And again, like if from a physically speaking, like if I have the time and I know the scenario I'm going to be in, I'll try and get some ring time in too. So I can kind of get a feel for the ring because I certainly won't be able to see it. So I'll get in there, I'll roll around, I'll attempt to hit the ropes if I can do it.
Sure.
And just try and get a physical comfort level with it.
That beautiful transition music into this commercial is brought to you by
Hallie Gray.
Hallie. How old are you?
7.
You're 7 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, you're growing up too fast. You're such a beautiful, smart, and amazingly talented girl. I loved that transition music. You're going to help me tell my listeners about an amazing place, a place called Net Pro Studios. Net Pro Studios is a wrestling...
Sounds cool.
It even sounds cool? I know it does. What do you think Net Pro Studios is?
I don't know.
Let me tell you what it is. It's a wrestling school.
That would be so cool.
Yeah. So people can go to facebook.com/netprostudios, NETPROSTUDIOS, Net Pro Studios. They have some wonderful trainers there, including a very good friend of mine, Crazy Steve.
I like that wrestler.
You like that wrestler? Me too. He's a good friend of mine. You know what's amazing about Crazy Steve?
What?
He's blind. I wish everybody could see your face right now, Hallie. The look of amazement. How can you be a wrestler if you're blind, Hallie?
I don't know.
You don't know? I know. I don't know either. But guess what? Crazy Steve is so talented and amazing. He can do all of the moves and amazing things without ever hurting his opponent, all in the ring, even though he's blind. Can you believe it?
That's why I get now why he's called Crazy Steve.
Oh, yes. Because you must be crazy to wrestle when you're blind, right?
Yeah.
I know. So he is so talented, and he's passing on all of his knowledge and his talent onto other people because he's teaching at this wrestling school. He's one of the teachers. And here's something else that's really cool about Net Pro Studios. Their arena, the place where they do their training, they called it Beautiful Bobby Eaton Arena. Beautiful Bobby Eaton is another amazing professional wrestler who, unfortunately, he's passed away. He died recently, but his family gave Crazy Steve and all of his friends the blessing that they could name their arena after Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
Yes, and Beautiful Bobby Eaton, he was a beautiful man. Nobody ever had anything bad to say about this man. Everybody really loved Beautiful Bobby Eaton. He's one of the best wrestlers of all time. And they named the arena after him. Do you think that was a good idea?
Yeah.
Isn't that? It's a very good idea. So if people want to learn to be a professional wrestler, where should they go?
To the teaching place.
To the teaching place. Do you remember what it's called? Oh.
Kind of.
Kind of. Well, let's say it together. Net
Pro
Studios.
Studios.
One more time. Net
Pro
Studios.
Studios.
So where should people go to learn how to be a wrestler?
Net Pro Studios.
Very good. So just go to facebook.com/
Net Pro Studios.
and you can learn more about what they are offering there. Let me just give you a little bit more information just in case you want to email them and know their address and everything. Let's give that to them too. It's 100 Emery Lane in Kingsport, Tennessee. You don't need to be from Tennessee to go to this school. I think anybody from all around the world should go to this school because you don't want to just go to the wrestling school that's closest to you. You want to go to the best, and Net Pro Studios is the best. And if you want to email them to get some more information, just email netprostudios@gmail.com. What is that again? It's netprostudios@gmail.com. Hallie, what is it? It's
netprostudios@gmail.com.
Oh, very good, Hallie. I appreciate you coming on here and letting everyone hear your beautiful voice to help me tell people about Net Pro Studios. Yes. Can you say bye to everybody?
Bye.
Yeah. So you just mentioned EY again, you know, the training with EY. We've talked about mentors. I know EY for me was one of my original first mentors. I'm assuming one of yours as your trainer.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Is there one, I know EY he's such a smart and insightful person. Is there one piece of life advice that you think you took away from your training under EY? Not just wrestling advice, but like advice that you've applied to your life. And maybe you've never even thought of this before.
Yeah, I haven't. Jeez, oh my goodness. That's a really good question. Because the lessons are there.
Yes.
I mean, like part of one of my chapters of my story, like I lived with him for 5 years when I first moved to the United States.
Dude, I forgot about that. I don't know why. I didn't even have that in my list of questions, but of course I knew that. Yes.
Yeah. So
right.
like I've spent a lot of time with him. Been fortunate enough to spend quite a bit of time with him.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. I honestly I don't have an answer for that question, but it's not to say that I haven't. Like, it's only because I think I see him as much as that I've seen him and just subconsciously taken like how he just navigates life and
Yes.
such and so
Okay,
forth.
so this comes to mind for me. There's two things.
Mhm.
One thing that EY has done in his life, and I want to see what your response was to this.
Mhm.
He always talked about he didn't give himself a backup plan. You talked about earlier about like you tried to have an option B.
Yeah.
EY always says, I didn't have a backup plan. It was I was going to succeed at this or not. It was my only option. I didn't create another option for myself. I wasn't like that. I didn't I I didn't go that route. I created a safety net and other options for myself. How did you respond to that thinking of UIs for yourself in your
Well,
life?
that makes sense for you, man, not for me. Like, like
Sure.
like how I saw it was like, because I mean, like, especially in our training, I put him up on a pedestal, right? Obviously. So seeing his back, like having known that he doesn't have a backup plan, I understood it from his standpoint because he's a maniac and
Yep.
he's the best at everything and can just do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for sure. But me, I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
not that, right? So I need the backup plan because we're two different people.
Yeah.
And what works for him isn't necessarily going to work for me.
Yeah. That in itself is good advice right there, Steve. Because when
Yeah.
I talk to young people, like EY could talk to a young person and say, hey man, don't limit yourself or don't worry so much about having a backup plan and creating a safety net. Like just go for it. I think that's good advice. But
I do too.
I would say the opposite to a kid. I'd say, hey, like it's probably a good idea to have an option B because pro wrestling is not a guarantee. Having an option B is a really good idea because option A of wrestling might not turn out. So I created an option B for myself. But it all depends on the person.
Yes.
It's relative on
Yes.
whether or not that's going to work for you or not. So you just internalized it and knew that's really amazing thought process and motivating to a certain extent, but not going to work for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that maybe you'll remember this quote more than me because I've used it and I don't remember the exact wording, but it's about hesitation and fear.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
What is that exact line that he
Yes.
always used to say? Do
I
you remember?
use it. I'll be using it later today when I go to wrestling school and
Okay,
teach.
perfect.
But
Yes.
this is about this encapsulates UI perfectly.
Yep.
And it's don't think, because when you think, thinking causes fear. Fear causes hesitation. When you hesitate, you get injured. Getting injured sucks. Don't think.
Yes, dude. So don't you think that that's good life advice though too?
It depends on the person. For
Okay.
EY, he
All
doesn't
right.
think, he just goes all in.
Right.
He's like, you know what? I want a tattoo. Now he's covered in tattoos. I like comic books. He's got every comic book. You know what? I think I like vinyl. Now he's got all the vinyl. Like
Yeah.
he's always all in, and that has worked out for him, and it is awesome, and it is motivating, and it's super cool.
Yes.
I need to think about things. Sometimes I
see.
need to hesitate.
Yeah.
Especially like I'm blind. I gotta hesitate, otherwise I'll walk off the bridge.
Right.
Right. So hesitation and thinking has always kind of been in my wheelhouse.
Sure.
But that it's all like it's not only for person, but it's also scenario related too, because the idea of don't think, just do it, really that applied very well for me in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
Like if I was scared to do a move, he'd say, "Okay, nope, stop. You're not doing it. Get down. I'll call you up, and then then I'll tell you when to do it." And like, because again, I'm thinking about it too much, and
Yes.
that's when you get hurt.
Yeah.
So yes, it is good life advice in certain scenarios.
Absolutely. Well said. So eventually you do just gotta stop thinking about it and just jump in and have your first match, right? Because
Yes.
that's something where you could never feel like you're ready for your first match. You could overthink that and go, I'm not ready. And I've seen guys do this. So I'm not ready. I need to learn this. I need to learn that. And at some point, you just got to dive in, have your first match, start working the indies, which is eventually what you did. But a lot of people don't realize the struggle of independent wrestling, how much of a struggle it is. What did that struggle for you teach you about yourself as a man struggling on the independent scene and striving? Did it teach you anything about yourself as a man?
It definitely instilled the idea of like it's you just have to keep going. You have to keep working at it, right?
Yeah.
And yes, you can look at it as a struggle, but I will tell you, like going back, I never looked at it as a struggle because I was so thrilled to be doing it.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah.
there are times, yes, where like we didn't get paid or we're losing money or, you know, like things didn't go well for whatever reason. And you can dwell on those and it is part of the struggle, but also like it's goes back to I don't know what the saying is exactly, but like
If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I was thinking the same thing, man. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's what not only I chose to focus on, but like subconsciously I was already focusing on that. Like I'm thinking about drive homes in the winter when you're sweaty because you just got out of the building, but it's freezing in the car. You got a long ride, you're hurt. But we weren't talking about that. We were rebooking the territory. We were talking about how awesome this was or what we thought about this or like what we're going to do next time. Like, and that even goes to like from working out because that doesn't happen overnight either. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I want to be in shape. I want to be this, that, and the other. And I have a vision of what I think I should look like, but that doesn't happen overnight. And I can remember myself and Jake O'Reilly walking out of the baseboard and gym and saying, one day I'll be in shape. But this will feel good to walk out of the gym one day when I'm in shape. But right now, everything just hurts, and I don't look any different.
Yes. Yeah. It's so true though, right? Yeah. It's just pushing through that. For me, the big difference was working out so much harder because I don't like it naturally. Okay. I don't enjoy it. There's certain parts of it that I do. Like you enjoy the results and so I enjoy the solitude, like you said earlier, like just it's an escape to a certain extent. But my life is so busy now. It's not that. It's just a nuisance. Whereas the struggle of wrestling, I've never even thought of it that way, Steve, but you're so right. I didn't think of it as a struggle either. I also was just so thrilled that I was even able to say that this is what I'm doing on the weekends, where everybody else, when they're 18 years old, is cramming for their exam. I was supposed to be cramming for my exam because I went to university, but I wasn't cramming for my exam. I was traveling with my buddies on the indies and getting the next booking. So do you have any advice for young indie wrestlers that maybe are struggling right now? Because I know that's a real thing. Maybe they are actually feeling like a struggle. Is there any piece of advice that you could give those guys? Being someone who has gone through that journey, come out the other side, accomplish some goals. Do you have any advice?
There was a piece of advice that was given to me, and I was pretty young in the business when it was given to me. It was wrestling is a series of shit sandwiches, and it all depends on how much you want to eat. So and so sometimes it can be like you've just being fed shit sandwich after shit sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
But it does get better. It just depends on your appetite.
Yeah. Wow. That's wrestling or that's life advice, man.
Yeah.
And
it will come in circles too, because it can get better. But then, don't get me wrong, there'll be another turd sandwich in the future just waiting for you.
Yes,
and maybe a couple of them.
Yeah. And for me, I have found, haven't you found this, Steve? Like, we've both met so many guys that their first turd sandwich, they spit it out of their mouth and they walk off into the sunset, and we never see them again.
Yes.
right? It's that first disappointment, that first main shit sandwich that they're given. They take that first bite and it's like, nope. And they throw it down and they're gone. If you don't develop that appetite, you're not going to make it. Plain and simple, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to make
Correct.
it. You have to be able to do that. So you're eating turd sandwiches.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You're developing the appetite. Probably even more so than other people, because there's the garment on top of your shit sandwich is, oh, you're all doing all of this while not being able to drive anywhere, and traveling isn't easy and you can't see anything that's happening. How the hell do you get signed? How do you get that ever elusive contract then after going through an entire buffet of turd sandwiches? How does that become a reality?
So there's a bunch of different factors, right? Because it's not all turd sandwiches. Every now and again, you have what I like to call like a soul-saving show. Where a show happens and you get this rush and this buzz and the drug that is professional wrestling that you can't describe to anybody else. If you could bottle it, you'd never keep it in stock. Mm-hmm. You'd have one of those every now and again, and then you just be constantly chasing that dragon. And so it was, as you're chasing that dragon, you yourself are developing, getting better. And you can, I say this to a lot of young wrestlers too. There's one thing about having an ego and thinking you're the best. And then there's another thing about just constantly shitting on yourself and thinking you're the worst. You've got to find a happy medium. No one likes somebody who has an inflated ego, but if you are the opposite of that, like at some point you have to give yourself some credit. Otherwise, why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. So for me, I could see the good and the bad. I could see the things that I'm working that I need to work on, but there's also things that I find value in that I think others find value in. So that's also what kept me going, kept me, moving forward. And not only that, but outside of pro wrestling, my home life was in complete shambles. So I would use pro wrestling as not only as an escape, but like this is one of the major positive aspects of my life. So I would try and spend as much time there as I possibly could.
Oh wow!
Yep. And in doing that, I'm making physical DVDs of a match, a promo, and like I would write up like a biography of who Crazy Steve is as a character and how he can be involved in this television show, which happened to be TNA Impact at the time. And this is around 2014. This is when this is happening. Okay. I was always trying to get with Impact from like 2005, like ever since EY was hired there in 2004.
Yep.
My goal as a professional wrestler kind of changed in that I want to work for the WWF, WWE, because that's what I grew up with. That's the Mecca. That's the thing. To my buddy, trainer, mentor, Eric Young, works for this company. I don't know. This company is just getting off the ground. But one thing I know is if I'm going to go to work, I want to work with my friends.
Sure.
And so that motivated me to kind of like switch gears. Not to say that I just dropped WWF at the time. I was still sending them tapes and stuff like that, but I wasn't getting any feedback from them.
It's also like an encouraging reality to see this attainable goal, because this person that that is your friend has accomplished that goal. It's not this unattainable thing anymore.
Yes.
It's
real.
That it's real, and that's inspiring, because I know someone who has accomplished that, and I know I can hang with that guy in the ring. I think I can do this.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's huge.
It's monumental. And so at the time of all this is happening, personal life is in shambles. I'm at university at the time. I'm not having fun with that. In the other sense, I was dating a girl who lived in England, and I had decided I'm going to uproot my life, and I'm getting out of this town. I'm going to go to England.
And again, you applied that life lesson or that mentality, like, okay, got to get out of this scenario, got to get out of this situation. I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, something's got to happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. But that's not an easy thing to do, let alone like get around from A to B in your local small town. I'm trying to go to a different country.
Yeah.
So I had to get fingerprints done. I had to have a certain amount of money in my bank account, which I did not have in there. I had to do like all this paperwork and all that stuff. And not only did I have to do it once, but when it came time for the final test, like whether to say I was going to come or go, they said they denied me the first time around because I was $8 short in my bank account.
Oh my God, Steve.
Yeah, from
Oh.
the money that was being borrowed. My dad, we were somehow getting along at this point, or getting along enough to the point where he's like, "I'll give you the money, but the very next day it's coming out of your bank account. It's coming to me." So it's not like he was giving it to me so I could move to the country and have like a nest egg. It was just to prove to these people that I had it in my account, and then he was going to take it all back.
Right.
So okay, so we did that, but it was $8 short, so they denied me. So I had to go through this process twice. I mean, I had to go travel to get my had to travel to get my fingerprints done again, come back, and then wait for them to come through. The whole thing, had to do it twice, and then finally the second go around, I was granted access. So, this is all happening within like a matter of weeks. So just to keep everyone up to speed, so I send Eric Young a DVD. I send Eric Young a DVD of a match, a promo, a biography of like who this character is, like a whole package of it. And he's going to put it in the right hands at Impact Wrestling. On the other hand, at home, my mom had just committed suicide. So that's a huge wind out of my sail.
Of course.
Yep. So I'm going through all this. Then on top of that, I get my visa that says I can move to the UK.
Okay.
All this is kind of all mashed into one. Yeah. And I'm having to it's a lot. It's very overwhelming.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's strange in how it worked out too. So on one hand, like my mom and her funeral and all that stuff, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Yes.
But then I get my visa that says I can go. Mm-hmm. And so it was so strange, and because up until that point, I felt very uncomfortable or awkward about leaving my mom because she was sick, and I was looking after her as much as I could, but at the same time I knew I had to get out. But if I left her, that would weigh on me.
Sure.
Right. And then this happened, and then I get this visa, and I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. And then a couple days after that, EY gets a hold of me and says, hey, they're going to bring you in for a tryout. They've seen your package. They're going to bring you in for a tryout in March. I said, in March? I'm supposed to move out of the country at the end of February here.
And that's going to do it for another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner. That is part 2, the end of part 2 of this epic trilogy with my friend, Crazy Steve. I told you guys that you were going to get something out of this. I don't know what you got out of today's talk with Steve, but I know everybody's going to have something different that they were able to take away from this amazing story from my friend Steve. The fact that he's being so open and vulnerable, like I said at the beginning of the show, in terms of literally taking off the paint and showing us his true self and telling us his true life, fascinating story. I want to know what you guys have gotten out of today's episode, because everybody's going to get something different. Please take a screenshot of this, put it on your socials, tag me at Cody Deaner, and let me and Steve know what you learned here today. Or you can drop me a review, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, watching this on YouTube. Put a comment. I'll read it on the show. I'll make sure that Steve hears how you're being inspired by his story, because that's what this is all about. I very much appreciate you guys listening each and every week and adding this show to your podcast rotation. Next week, we are going to have the conclusion to this epic trilogy of the story, the life story, the journey of our friend Crazy Steve. And man, I you are not going to want to miss this conclusion. If you don't want to wait until next week, you're like, I can't wait, Cody. Don't make me wait till next week to listen to the end of this story. I'm enthralled now. I'm addicted to this. I need to know more. Well, hey, I'm not making you wait. You're just waiting till next week to get it for free, but I can give it to you early and ad-free right now. You can go over to patreon.com/Cody Deaner and you can get the entire trilogy right now over on patreon.com/Cody Deaner. There's a bunch of different levels there. You can just throw me a couple bucks and be like a level 0. Just throw me a couple bucks for support. If you're loving this podcast, you want to throw me a couple bucks, please go do that. Or you can be a level 1 mark and get the show is early and ad free. You can become a level 2 smart mark. That's where you'll get yourself some bonus stories and all kinds of other cool bonus content. Or you can be a level 3 Deaner Maniac Megamark, and I'll be mailing merch out to you. I'll send you quarterly personal shout out videos. I'll even bring you onto this podcast if you want to, and we'll let you be a quick guest on the show. I just appreciate you guys supporting me. One of those ways is through patreon.com/Cody Deaner. If you're a business, you want to advertise on the show, hit me up at ads@codydeaner.com. You want a t-shirt, go to prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner. You want a cameo from me, you got a birthday, you got a graduation, you're thinking, oh, Christmas is right around the corner, Halloween. Oh, let's just not jump to Christmas. Halloween's right around the corner. You want a nice, spooky, scary story from me? I guess I can do that. I can do whatever you want. Do that over at cameo.com/Cody Deaner. Check me out on YouTube at Cody Deaner Podcast, and rate and review, subscribe, leave me a comment. I'll read it on the show, and I'll do that next week. You want to put a review down? I'll read it next week on part 3 with Crazy Steve, the epic conclusion. Again, thank you to my friend Steve, and let's stop plugging my stuff. Let's just again plug something for Crazy Steve. You heard about it already in the middle of the show. You heard about Net Pro Studios. This is Crazy Steve's professional wrestling school in Kingsport, Tennessee. It's a wonderful place. I mean, you've learned something, and like I said, and I asked if you were able to share it on your social medias, tag me in it. You've learned something today. Well, just imagine the fact that just in the last little bit, this last hour or less that you've listened to Steve, what you've learned from him. Imagine if you want to get in the professional wrestling business and you got to train on the daily with Crazy Steve, the amount of things that you would learn, not just about the wrestling business, but about life. I know every time I talk to Steve, I learn something about myself and about my life by listening to his story and the way he approaches life in general with all the ups and downs that he's had to endure and overcome. This is exactly why I wanted to do this, guys, and get into this podcast adventure, because I have known for so long through my own experience and experience with my friends like Steve that there are so many life lessons we can learn through our journey in professional wrestling. And there's a lot of things that we can learn about wrestling by listening to people's life and bringing that into this wonderful world of professional wrestling that we love. I just want to reiterate and say one more time, actually not even say it one more time, I just want to say this, I guess maybe for the first time, this is one of the best things I've ever done in wrestling, getting to share this story. It makes me feel so good that I'm able to share with the world this story that I've known about for so long, that I've kind of always just wished and hoped that the world would appreciate Steve and what he's going through. And I'm starting to see that now, that the world is starting to realize just how awesome of a man my friend Crazy Steve is. And if I can help in any way make the world know how awesome my friend is, then I know I'm doing something right. And I'm feeling like we're doing that with these stories that Steve is sharing with you guys, both last week in part 1, this week in part 2, and we're going to get more of that next week in part 3 with Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with me, Cody Deaner. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. is wrestling.